which I feel is very interesting subject. Because if you are interested in research, you should learn this subject. So it is a PG course. So those who are good CGPA can take this as an elective also later, if got as a full course. Okay, so we'll start design of experiments. So basically we'll cover only the introduction. What is some terms? So what is the importance of how do we do plan an experiment? So that part we'll just discuss. The computations and all are, you have studied a little bit in ANOVA and measurement density approach, but we'll not go into details. So we'll start with the key people who develop the subject, then discuss approaches to problem solving, especially with a view of industry, then define what is design of experiments, then discuss the problems with historical data. So nowadays there is a lot of emphasis or interest in historical data, mainly because we are getting a lot of data automatically with computers and all. So people say they don't need to do an experiment. So that is one philosophy. So, but that is not correct. One experiment is much better than so much of past data. This is what we'll discuss. So what are the problems with historical data? We'll see. Then we'll see an example, a case study, how an experiment is planned and conducted, a designed experiment, how it is done. Then followed by a demonstration. We'll see a live demo. Okay, this semester I think I'll do a demo with simulated simulation of a collision, something. Perhaps we'll do a demo with that. Okay, so first let us discuss the key people who developed design of experiments. So the first person is Sir Ronald Aylmer Fisher. He died quite some time back. So he did his PhD from Cambridge. Actually, after doing his graduation, he wanted to do PhD, but he did not join. He did his graduation at Cambridge, but he did not join there. So he had a small disagreement with the HOD there. So he didn't join there. And the director of this Rothamsted Agricultural Experiment Station. So he approached Cambridge for some person to help him analyze the experiments being conducted at this experimental station. So they have been carrying out experiments so many years. So they had a lot of data, 66 years of data. So this agriculture experiment station was actually a government organization, but it was on the land given by a fertilizer company. So fertilizer company wanted to promote their fertilizers. So they gave the land to the government free and asked them to establish a research station to prove that fertilizers will improve yield. So there were agricultural scientists working there. So they did a number of experiments with various amounts of fertilizers, without fertilizer, etc. in different, and it was actually barren land, not very useful land. Okay, so the yield without fertilizer was very poor. And so that's why the company gave it free. It's a barren land. The agriculture is very difficult, so they gave it to the government free. So please try it out and prove that fertilizers or how to improve the yield of the crop. So they have been doing a lot of analysis, or they have been doing a lot of experiments, but they were not able to come to conclusions. So they approached the Department of Statistics at Cambridge and asked for some person to help. And they suggested, okay, well, somebody suggested Fisher. So he was just completed graduation. He wanted to join for PhD, but because of, actually as part of his graduation, he had written a paper. And that paper went for review to a journal, and the editor was this HOD, and he was not releasing the paper. So because of that, he was angry and he did not join for PhD there at that time. So when this opportunity came, he joined this company, and then he started publishing papers almost 1 in 2 weeks. So Fisher was very interesting person. He had a severe eye problem, very difficult to see. So because of that, he had to do a lot of the mathematics in his head. So he developed the ability to analyze complex data, large amount of numbers without writing down. So that was the problem. So his paper on analysis of data was other people could not follow, because he jumped from one step to other, and others were not able to follow. So they were keeping pending. They could not say it is wrong also and reject the paper, and they could not say it is correct also and accept the paper. So it was kept pending, and I think after several years only it got published, because the paper was so difficult, had a lot of data. So in the 1930s, he established the fundamentals of design of experiments. So he analyzed this data and showed that the best explanation for the difference in yield was the different years' rain rather than the amount of fertilizer or the variety of crop, etc. So it was a negative result. So that's why he said, so if you should consult a statistician before doing the experiment. After doing the experiment, if you consult him, he can only do a postmortem. He can tell you why the experiment was a failure. Do a good experiment in advance. So he laid down the fundamentals of design of experiments. For example, randomization. Experiments should be carried out in random order. That was again promoted by Fisher. So before Fisher's period, there were no real standards on how experimentation should be done. Many times people gave some experimental results in their papers, but when you check, they were not correct, or they were not properly done, or they were too non-random. So Fisher proved that many of the experiments could not have been real experiments. It must be simulated results only. So modern experimental method was developed after Fisher. So he wrote 2 books. Okay. So one of the first papers is this one. So studies in crop variation, an examination of the yield of dressed grain from broadbark by R.I. Fisher, MA. See, he didn't have a PhD at that time. Statistical Laboratory, Rothamsted Experimental Station, Harpenden. The variation in wheat yield. So very interesting. So the variation of yield for different varieties of crops, etc., etc. And over several years. So there were a lot of some complex analysis which he was able to. So first paper is on design of experiments. So that was one of the problems with Fisher's treatment of the subject. So nobody could follow what was happening. So later, so everybody asked Fisher to write a book on how to conduct experiments. So he wrote the first book, first published 1935, The Design of Experiments. So here he told about methods of analysis, mainly analysis of variance. So that was developed by Fisher. So then that also people felt it was very complicated. So people requested him to write a simpler book, and that is the statistical methods for research workers. Again, first published 1925, and so many editions. I don't know, even now it may not be there. So of course he has updated a lot. So he so here he avoided much of the mathematics and simply gave the methods of calculation, so that all researchers could follow this. So there is another story about him, is about this lady tasting tea. So how do we prove something? For example, an astrologer, he claims to be able to predict the future. So Fisher suggested some methods. For example, there was a lady who said she could identify whether the tea was poured into the milk or milk was poured into the tea. So how do we test this? So Fisher suggested a randomization test. So if you give one sample and she says correctly, does not prove anything, isn't it? So by there's a 50% chance you can prove correctly that, tell correctly that tea was poured into milk or milk was poured into tea. Either one you choose, there's a 50% chance that it is correct. So how do we test? So we have to test several samples. Say how many samples? That's right, that we have to decide. Say 8 samples or 10 samples. And how many should be identified correctly to prove that the person has the ability? So nowadays we use such tests to debunk astrologers. I don't know how many of you are fond of astrology. So all these are non-scientific practices. So Fisher suggested methods to test such claims. Okay, so that is the basics of hypothesis testing, etc. Okay, that was there earlier also, but experimentally, how do you do that? Was developed by Fisher. Okay, so that is the contributions of Fisher. So please read the Wikipedia or the book, that Lady Tasting Tea, for more details about Fisher. And the second person is who contributed a lot to design of experiments is Dr. George E.P. Box. So he died a few years back, even after I had started teaching this subject. So in the 50s, he established several methods, or he applied design of experiments to the chemical engineering industry, process industry. So he was basically a chemist, and he was working in a paint manufacturing company. And to make paint, you have to mix a number of chemicals. And paint film should be quite strong. It should dry quickly. The thickness of the film should be as small as possible. So like that, number of conflicting requirements are there. So how do you adjust the composition to get the best performance, best paint? So box. So this methods, such methods were not available in the chemistry books. So he went to universities and started asking. So so this must be a statistical method. So because we have to consider the variability also. So consider the Department of Statistics at Cambridge because that was very famous at that time. So he went there and contacted several people, and I think the head of the department was Pearson at the time. So he said, sorry, the methods for this have not yet been developed. So why don't you join here for PhD in this area? So Box thought a good idea and he joined there for PhD. And at the same time, there, of course, Fisher, after working several years at Northampton, he joined back to Cambridge, did his PhD, and then he joined there as a faculty at that time. So Box was also at that in the same university, and though of course his guide was different, but he did have some interaction with Fisher. And the interesting thing is Box married Fisher's daughter, and afterwards they wrote a book about Fisher, about biography of Fisher, so jointly. So that's from how we got a lot of information about Fisher. So after completing PhD, he went to the United States and joined Imperial Chemical Industries there. And later as a faculty at Madison University also. So where he was working throughout his life, and he contributed a lot. He developed the technique of evolutionary operation. So how do you optimize a process? By adjusting not one variable at a time, but several variables at a time. So that is evolutionary operation. Then response surface cell analysis. How do you find the optimum for several input variables? So this was also developed by Dr. George E.P. Box. Okay, so Box applied design of experiments to the process industry. And finally, we come to Dr. Jenichi Taguchi. So he also died a few years back. So in the 70s, of course, Japan was improving their quality very drastically. So they were all interested in quality improvement, and in that course, so it was the industry was very looking for various techniques how to improve the quality of their products and services. And there, Taguchi came of help. So he helped the industry improve their products. So he came up with the technique of robust product design. So, for example, a television set or a radio should give good quality audio, even whatever be the voltage. Okay, it should not depend on the voltage given to the set. So it should be robust to such environmental variations. So we came up with the theories of robust product design. So Taguchi, of course, has an association with, he was a visiting faculty at Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. And so he learned a lot of the statistical analysis tools from there. At IS also there was Hala Nobis and all, who were world-class statisticians. So Fisher, of course, had developed the basic tools of analysis, but the difficulty was that it was very complicated. So analysis of variance, sum of squares and sum of squares. So you partition the data into so many types of sum of squares and do analysis. So at that time, there were no computers. So how can industry apply that? It was very difficult. So Taguchi came up with several graphical tools to simplify this analysis of experimental data. But of course, that required a lot of assumptions. So nowadays, that's why many people criticize the Taguchi. The exact methods proposed by Taguchi is not very good. And now, of course, we have computers, we have software. So we don't have to do the tedious analysis. So the computer will do it for you. So you don't have to use those shortcut methods. So that's why now there is perhaps some criticism about the Taguchi methods, but his contribution of having applied design of experiments to the manufacturing industry. So of course, the two cases were very famous. So one is the chocolate. So chocolate in Japan, of course, the temperatures are very extreme. So in winter it is very cold, in summer it is very hot. So if you make chocolate during winter, you have to make it sufficiently soft, then only people will be able to, or it will be very tasty and people will buy it. But if you stock it during summer, it will start melting. And the other way around, if you make chocolates for summer, it should be very hot, but then for winter, it will be very, very hot. So how do you make the composition such that it will not change? It will be reasonably soft and should not melt, whatever be the temperature. So that was one of the first problems Taguchi published a paper on, how to adjust the composition to get maximum or good taste, to not too hard and should not melt fast. So then ceramic tiles also, but how to reduce the breakage in manufacture ceramic tiles, how to adjust the composition. You can add various chemicals and how to minimize breakage in ceramic tiles, minimize bending, etc. So such experiments Taguchi reported in the beginning. So, and of course, he came up with several graphical and simple tabular methods of analysis, which of course now with software it is not necessary. But his concept of robust product design is definitely valid, and that there have been a lot of developments in that area. Okay, so these are the three people who contributed a lot to the development of design of experiments. So how to solve problems? So now we come to what are the problems in industry? How does industry solve a problem? So industry generally, they have to design various products. For example, simple example is you want to make a chair. So how do you design a chair? So can somebody suggest how do we? So you want to decide. Okay, one is the shape. Of course, it has to be decided. Then what should be the thickness of cross section of a leg? How do you decide? So if you were asked to determine the area of cross section of a leg, what will you do? Can somebody write in the chat box? What method will you approach? Which subject knowledge will you make use of? Which theory will help you? Yes, stress analysis. So we know the load, we can predict what is the maximum load. So to withstand that maximum load, what is the material based on the material properties, etc., we can calculate the strength, the stress, maximum stress developed, etc., and ensure that it is within the strength of the material. So strength of materials is the subject. So that is one approach. That is, you need a theory. So you need a theory of what is a, so if a load is applied on a structure, what will be the maximum stress developed? So you need to know that theory. Then you can compute, and then you can ensure that the design is good or safe. Then what is the, but does a carpenter, does he do stress analysis to make a table or a chair? No. Then, so he has seen some tables or chairs in use. So he knows, okay, what is the size used earlier? So then maybe he may try, okay, can I make it a little thinner? And then he sees what is the, how good it is. Will it break fast? Or is it sufficiently wrong? Okay, that means he can reduce the size a little bit. So like that. So through experience or through experimentation. Okay, so usually, of course, he does not do systematic experimentation, but he has, through experience, maybe he has done some random trials here, this way, that way, and so that is the other approach to solve problem. So we can do experiments and verify whether the design is okay. So you are designing a chair, you make a chair and apply some load on it. So what is the expected weight? 50 kg. Okay, you apply 100 kg. If the chair withstands, then the design is good. So that is the second approach to solve problems. So the second approach is more commonly used in industry. Why? Because the theory always makes use of a lot of assumptions. So finally, you have to verify it using experimentation. Then only it can be really used. So that is why we make a prototype, a product prototype, and test it, and only then you deliver it to the market. So you make prototypes. So I think Ibrahim will say he's not interested in theory, he's only interested in practice. So, but doing everything by practice is very expensive. So for example, if you want to go to the moon, so if you don't see any theory and you start making rockets, just make a rocket and fire it. Will it go reach the moon? So that is very expensive. So experimentation generally is without some theory, it becomes very expensive. So that's why we try to do a combination of the two. We start with some theory and come up with some plan, and then finally we verify it using experiments. Okay, so theory always requires experimentation. Why? We cannot get anything purely by theory, because, for example, the chair design, you need to know the material properties. So what is the property of wood? Or if you are using steel, what is the property of the steel? What is the strength of the steel? how much stress can it withstand. So unless you have that experimental data, you cannot really do a theory also. So we need to combine the two. So the final verification is always by experimentation. So theory can give you some initial codes. So you follow that. So that is all based on a summary of experience plus theory also. So in general, the two methods are theory and experimentation. So the simplest approach is the one factor in carrying out an experiment is the one factor time method, where we vary only one factor, keeping others constant. Then we vary another factor, keeping the remaining factors constant. This was the approach recommended earlier. So because it was very simple, so you can plot the graphs easily. So you have only one variable. How the other variable, the response variable changes, you can plot through simple graphs. So this was the original approach to systematic experimentation. But what are the problems with this approach? So this one factor at a time is time consuming. For example, if you have two factors, so first factor you do at 5 levels, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And then you have to study the second factor. So first factor you do at 5 levels. Second factor also, if you have 5 levels, the number of combinations is 5 into 5, 25. And if there are 3 factors, 5 into 5 into 5, 125 trials will be required. So to do all these trials is very time consuming. So that was the problem with the one factor to time approach. And do we really need to do all these combinations? No, it is actually they are extra work. If you do all the possible combinations, it is actually extra work. It is unnecessary work. So some people, instead of doing all possible combinations, first find the optimum for one factor, then find the optimum for another factor, then find the optimum for another factor, etc. So that is a shortcut method. So what is the problem with that shortcut method? The shortcut method cannot guarantee optimal solution. Okay, since you are not doing all possible combinations, some combinations may be missed out, and that can lead to less than optimal solution. So this we'll discuss in detail later. So one factor time, some cases it is okay. Sometimes you may get the optimal solution in certain conditions, and sometimes it may be necessary. For example, when the response depends on level, multi-peak response is there. The response, if you make a slight change in the variable, there's a sudden increase in response. For example, like tuning a radio. So you know that it is near, say, 700 kilohertz. So you just slightly tune it. If it only at that exact point, you'll get the signal. Either side, it will come down very fast. So the response depends on level. In such a case, that is, there is a multi-peak response, then you have to adjust very slowly. So one factor at a time with large number of levels may be necessary to detect the optimum variables. Then in one condition, it may be okay. That is, one factor at a time may be okay when the effect of one factor does not depend on the level of other factors. So this is a certain situation. Okay, the effect of one factor does not depend on level of other factors. So this is not a common situation. So most of the time there is some what we call interaction. So this is called interaction. When the effect of one factor depends on the level of another factor. So that is called interaction. Usually these two are unusual. Usually we don't have multi-peak response, except in vibrations and all it is there. Resonance is a multi-peak response phenomenon. So there it is important, but usually most cases it is not that important. And usually interaction is always there. So both are unusual. So usually the response is smooth, like the water in the lake. So it will not vary suddenly. But of course, when wind is there, there may be small waves and all. But the overall variation will be quite smooth. So the response is usually smooth. So if the response is smooth, carrying out large number of levels, a number of trials, let's say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc., is meaningless because the difference between levels is very small. And then when the effect of one factor depends on the level of one or more of other factors, you may be led to completely wrong conclusions. So when there is interaction, you may get completely wrong conclusions if you do the one factor at a time method. So that I'll illustrate through a case study. So this case study was given by Dr. George E.P. Box earlier. His book on statistics for experimenters is one book. So what is the best possible yield? So this is again, as Box is a chemical engineer or chemistry man. So he gives example of this. How do you determine the possible best yield in a chemical process system? So there were two variables, temperature and time. And the response variable, the variable of interest is the yield. So you can run the process at various temperatures for various times. So first you are doing one factor at a time. So you keep time constant at 10 hours and then vary temperature 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250 and measure the yield at each temperature. So you got highest yield at 220 degrees Celsius. So now you keep temperature at 220 degrees Celsius. Temperature is kept at 220 degrees Celsius. Then vary the time, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. Highest yield is at 8 hours. So we can conclude that, optimum temperature is 220 degrees Celsius and 8 hours is the optimum time. How much is the yield we get? 86. So this is one factor time without doing all possible combinations. You optimize one variable at a time. But what is the problem? We have not done all possible combinations. Suppose we had done all possible combinations. What would have been the result? So you vary temperature and time. Time 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Temperature 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250. So each combination of temperature and time, you measure the yield. And of course, it's difficult to plot graph between for three variables because we have temperature, time, and yield. So here I use what is called an iso yield plot. That is constant yield values are joined with a line. So that means along this line we have, this is 65% yield. Along this line we have 70% yield. Along this line yellow is 75% yield. This is 80% yield. This is 85% yield. This is 90% yield. 95% yield. Maybe here the optimum. Let us first discuss our earlier experiment. What did we do first? We kept time at 10 hours, varied temperature, and we got optimum temperature as 220 degrees Celsius. So then we kept temperature at 220 degrees Celsius, varied the time, and got the optimum time as 8 hours. So this point is the optimum based on these two lines. But what is the real optimum? The real optimum is somewhere here. So if you do one factor at a time and optimize one variable at a time, you cannot guarantee the optimum. It is some optimum, but it's not the absolute optimum. Okay, in order to get the absolute optimum, you have to guarantee the absolute optimum, you have to do all possible combinations. Otherwise, you may miss this optimum point. So here the yield was 85% and here it is 95%. Okay. So if you're satisfied with 85%, maybe the shortcut method is good enough. But if you want to get, so nowadays it's a very competitive world. So you have to get the best result. Okay, you have to get the cheapest product, you have the highest yield. So all this will come only when you work at the optimum level of the factors. So then you have to really get the optimum. Okay, so this is the real optimum, which can be obtained only by, which cannot be obtained by shortcut method of one factor at a time. Okay, how to get the optimum? Again, first one method is all possible conditions. And of course, that is very time consuming. So we come up with some other ideas later. So why did this one factor at a time fail? In short, we say it is because of interaction. So the variables interact. That is, the effect of one variable depends on the level of another variable. And generally, interaction is the rule, not an exception. So many cases, most practical cases, there will be some interaction. So for example, this was a problem in agriculture. So nowadays, of course, everybody knows that we have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. All three elements are required for good yield. So if you add only nitrogen, you may get some 20% increase in yield. If you add only potassium, you may get 30% increase in yield. If you add nitrogen plus potassium, it is not 20 plus 30%. 30 is equal to 50%, but you may get maybe 80% more yield because there is an interaction between the factors. Okay, so that is the reason for failure, interaction between factors. Then in that case, you cannot get the optimum by one factor at a time, a third. So the solution is we have to do a designed experiment. So that is the purpose of designed experiment. To study the effect of many factors, not just one factor, we study the effect of several factors simultaneously. So we deliberately vary several factors this way, that way. Okay, so that is why it's not so simple. We need to learn how to do it in the most efficient way. That is, with least number of trials, we should be getting the result. So that is our aim of design of experiments. So what is an experiment? So experiment is a series of tests in which purposeful changes are made to the input variables of a process so that we may observe and identify corresponding changes in the output response. So you make deliberate changes to the input variables of a process. So the changes should be deliberately made, not natural changes. That is the key point. So a series of tests is called an experiment. So for example, temperature 100 degrees, time 2 hours, that is one test. So all the tests together is called an experiment. So this plan of experiment, which each variable, what should be the value, that is called the experimental design. So design of experiments means planning this or developing this experimental plan. Okay, so that is the definition given by Montgomery. So he has written many books on probability and statistics. He is actually not a mathematician, basically, but a mechanical engineer. So he did bachelor's, master's, and PhD in industrial engineering at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, and he is currently professor emeritus at University of Washington. No, not this is Arizona University now. 88. Then 88 he joined Arizona University and is currently professor of industrial and management systems. So he applied statistics to industry, and that's how became famous. So he has written several books on probability and statistics, including design of experiments. Also, he has written a classic textbook. Okay, so that is an experiment. So what is the difficulty in experimentation? So what is the biggest problem in experimentation? That is experimental variability. So when you repeat an experiment, you don't get the same result always. So what is the reason for that? The system may be affected by other variables which you have not identified, you have not controlled, and that is causing variation to the system. So repeated trials, we get different results. So we have seen measurement uncertainty. When you repeat the measurement, you don't get the same result. So that is because of influence quantity. Same way, an experiment, various factors which are not keeping under control, that varies and results in experimental variation. So, for example, this is in All India area weighted annual rainfall over several years. So every year the rainfall is changing. So in 2009, has the rainfall decreased compared to the past years? What do you feel? Please write in the chat box. Has the rain decreased or increased? What will be the rainfall for 2010? Can somebody predict the rainfall for 2010? Please write the predicted rainfall in the chat box. Okay, so this is below 1000, but actual rainfall was 1200. So when we follow a series, we have a tendency to extrapolate the last few points. So that is our problem. So manually forecasting is not very good. Always we find some difficulties in human forecasting. So we need statistical methods to analyze and decide, is there a significant decrease in rainfall or is there a significant increase in rainfall? Or any experiment, is there any sufficient difference in outputs? For example, we know during this Corona, there was a report that hydroxychloroquine can cure corona. But later, and there were several trials, and some people said it is okay, some people it is not okay. There were a lot of days. Finally, now, of course, people say that it is confirmed that doesn't have an effect. So how did we conclude? So because of course, sometimes people get cured because of other medicines or other effects. So we have to carry out a statistical analysis. So without statistical analysis, we